In the early months of 1944, German forces had solidified their control over a key town in Eastern Europe. This town was strategically located, making it vital for their military operations. By securing this area, the Germans could effectively manage the supply routes necessary for their advancing troops and maintain a grip on the local population. The German military presence in the town was palpable. Soldiers patrolled the streets, their uniforms a constant reminder of the occupation. Fear loomed in the air, as the enforcement of military order meant strict consequences for those who resisted or opposed the regime. The residents found themselves living under a watchful eye, with little room for dissent. To maintain control, the Germans implemented a rigorous propaganda campaign. Posters plastered on walls displayed messages that praised the Reich and demonized the Allies. Broadcasts over the radio echoed similar sentiments, aiming to instill a sense of loyalty among the populace. Many people were reluctant to believe these messages, knowing the reality of the war and the suffering it brought. Local leaders, often coerced into cooperation, played a crucial role in this propaganda effort. Some were sympathetic to the occupiers, hoping that aligning with the Germans might protect their interests or ensure their own positions. Others, however, resented the loss of autonomy and the manipulation of their communities. This created a tense atmosphere where trust among neighbors began to erode. Amidst this chaos, everyday life continued, albeit under the shadow of war. Families tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy, children played in the streets, markets remained open, and people found ways to support one another. Yet the reality of shortages and fear of raids always loomed, casting a pall over daily routines. As winter gave way to spring, the stakes grew higher. The Allies were planning their next moves, and the importance of controlling such towns became even more apparent. The German command knew that losing this strategic location could change the course of the war. For the town's residents, the fight for freedom seemed closer than ever, but the path forward was fraught with uncertainty and danger. Amidst the oppressive environment of German occupation, one soldier stood out: Private First Class Daniel Thomas. Daniel was a young man from a modest background, raised in a small town where hard work and community values defined everyday life. He had grown up listening to stories of bravery and sacrifice, which fueled his desire to fight against tyranny. Assigned to a resistance group operating in the area, Daniel understood the risks involved. The group was small, made up of men and women who were just as determined as he was to push back against the occupiers. They met in secret, always wary of German patrols, knowing that any slip-up could lead to imprisonment or worse. Daniel was driven by a deep belief in freedom and justice. He felt a strong sense of duty to protect not only his country, but also the people suffering under the heavy hand of the occupiers. He was motivated by the stories of his parents, who had struggled to make a living, but had always taught him the importance of standing up for what is right. In his early days with the resistance, Daniel was tasked with gathering information. He moved quietly through the town, observing German movements and listening to conversations that might provide valuable insights. Each outing was filled with tension. The fear of being caught was ever present. But he remained focused, knowing that every bit of information could help the group plan their next steps. The bond between the members of the resistance grew stronger as they faced challenges together. They shared stories of their lives before the war, gave each other hope, and occasionally found moments of laughter amid the chaos. Daniel developed close friendships with his comrades, each holding on to their dreams of a free and peaceful future. As time passed, Daniel became more involved in the group's operations, participating in small missions to disrupt German supply lines or gather more intelligence. These tasks were dangerous but crucial. Every victory, no matter how small, served to boost morale and reminded him why he had chosen this path. Despite the hardship and fear surrounding them, Daniel held onto hope. He believed that their efforts could lead to real change. Even in the darkest days, he could envision a day when the town would be free again and its people could reclaim their lives. Daniel was determined to fight for that future, no matter the odds stacked against him. During one particularly tense night, Daniel and his comrades prepared for a daring raid on a German supply convoy. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation as they gathered in their secret hideout. Each member of the resistance understood the risks involved, but they were fueled by a shared determination to disrupt the enemy's operations. The plan was risky. They had been watching the convoy's movements for weeks, noting the times and routes taken by the German trucks. With a mixture of fear and adrenaline, they set off into the night, each step echoing the weight of their mission. Daniel felt his heart race, but he reminded himself of why they were doing this. It was about more than just supplies. It was about sending a message of defiance. As they approached the road where the convoy would pass, they took up their positions in the shadows, waiting for the right moment. The night air was still, each of them holding their breath, straining to hear the distant rumble of engines. Finally, the convoy came into view, several trucks lined up, surrounded by German soldiers. When the moment was right, Daniel and his team sprang into action. They had planned for this, every detail had been thought out. Using the cover of darkness, they moved swiftly. Some members set off distractions, creating noise and chaos to draw attention away from the main objective. Daniel and a few others focused on the trucks. They worked quickly, feeling the weight of time pressing against them. With well-aimed strikes, they managed to disable the vehicles, rendering them immobile. The confusion among the German soldiers was apparent, and in that moment, they realized they had the upper hand. Once they secured the supplies, which included food, medical kits, and ammunition, they knew they had struck a significant blow against the occupiers. They packed everything they could carry and quickly made their escape, retreating into the shadows from which they had come. As they regrouped at their hideout, the mood shifted. They were filled with a sense of exhilaration and camaraderie. They had achieved something remarkable together. The raid not only provided them with much-needed resources, but also boosted their morale in a time of uncertainty. Daniel's heart swelled with pride as he looked at his comrades. They had not just disrupted the enemy's logistics, they had reaffirmed their resolve to fight for their freedom. Each small victory fueled their hope that one day they would reclaim their town from the grip of oppression. Word of Daniel's bravery began to spread through the town like wildfire. After the daring raid on the German supply convoy, whispers of his courage reached more and more people. Initially, many residents were afraid to show their support, worried about the consequences of standing up to the Germans. But Daniel's actions sparked a change in them. As stories of the daring raid circulated, a sense of hope emerged among the townspeople. They began to see that resistance was not just possible, it was necessary. Daniel became a symbol of defiance against the occupiers. People who had once kept their heads down started to rally around him and the resistance group. They were inspired by the idea that they could fight back, even if they felt small against a mighty enemy. Meetings began to form in secret. Families and friends gathered in basements or behind closed doors to discuss ways they could support the resistance. Some offered food or shelter to the fighters, while others shared information about German movements. As the community united, the atmosphere shifted. Fear started to morph into determination. Daniel, aware of the growing support, felt a weight of responsibility. He knew that the stakes were high. Every person who joined their cause added both strength and risk to the movement. He wanted to encourage this spirit of resistance without putting anyone in danger. He made sure everyone knew the importance of keeping their actions discreet and being careful not to attract the attention of the German soldiers. With each passing week, the resistance grew. More people chose to speak out quietly against the occupiers, whether through small acts of defiance or by helping the resistance's efforts. They painted slogans on walls or left notes that inspired others. The atmosphere in the town was slowly changing. What once felt like a suffocating silence transformed into a chorus of quiet rebellion. The German forces began to notice these shifts. Cargo shipments were delayed, and reports of minor sabotage increased. The grip of the occupiers started to weaken as people became emboldened by Daniel's example. Together, they realized that the spirit of resistance thrived on unity and courage, which Daniel had sparked in their hearts. It was the beginning of a broader movement, one that promised liberation and hope in the face of oppression. As the resistance gained momentum, the Germans became increasingly concerned about the uprising. They intensified their efforts to suppress the growing movement, sending more troops into the town and tightening their grip on the local population. The atmosphere grew tense, with soldiers patrolling the streets more aggressively, searching for signs of rebellion. One fateful night, a fierce confrontation erupted. Daniel's group had planned an operation aimed at disrupting a supply route, knowing it would draw the Germans' attention. However, the response was swift and brutal. The Germans were prepared, and the clash turned chaotic quickly. Shots rang out, and the night was filled with the confusion of both sides struggling for control. In the heat of battle, Daniel's group faced significant losses. Friends and comrades were injured or captured, and the weight of their loss hung heavy on everyone who survived. As the dust settled and the German forces retreated, Daniel felt a mixture of grief and anger. They had fought hard, but the cost was steep. Yet, instead of fading, their resolve only strengthened in the aftermath. The survivors regrouped and held a meeting to honor their fallen brothers and sisters. They shared stories of bravery, reminding each other why they had joined the fight in the first place. The losses fueled their determination. They understood that for every setback, their cause was that much more important. Realizing that they needed to change their approach, Daniel and his comrades began to adopt guerrilla tactics. They trained in smaller, more agile groups, using the local terrain to their advantage. Instead of fighting head-on, they focused on quick strikes and swift retreats. They became adept at ambushes, hitting supply lines and patrols before disappearing into the shadows. This strategy not only minimized their losses, but also kept the Germans on edge. With every successful operation, the resistance grew bolder. Daniel encouraged his group to think creatively, using what little resources they had to outsmart the well-equipped German forces. They learned to listen to the locals for tips and potential hiding spots, strengthening their ties with the community. Through these tactical shifts, the group not only became more effective, but also inspired others to join their fight. The spirit of resistance spread further into the town. Daniel felt a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that with each small victory, they were inching closer to the dream of freedom. By the summer of 1944, the once quiet town had transformed into a hub of resistance. What started as small acts of defiance had grown into a full-fledged movement, largely thanks to Daniel's leadership and the collective efforts of the locals. People from all walks of life had come together, united by a common goal, to push the German forces out of their home. Daniel had become a figurehead of hope in the community. His courage inspired others, and he worked tirelessly to ensure that every member of the resistance felt valued and needed. He listened to their ideas, encouraged their contributions, and fostered a sense of ownership over their fight for freedom. With each operation, every small victory, the spirit of resistance ignited a fire in the hearts of the townspeople. As the summer heat settled in, the resistance became more organized. They established secret communication channels and developed lists of potential allies in neighboring areas. The local population, once fearful and hesitant, now actively participated by providing food, information, and shelter to the fighters. Children delivered messages, and women gathered intel while carrying out everyday chores, while men trained for more direct confrontations with the enemy. The German forces, feeling the pressure of the increased resistance, ramped up their patrols and responded with violence. This only served to rally the community even more. Tension filled the air, but so did determination. The resistance became more strategic and united. They planned larger operations that targeted supply depots and communications lines, disrupting the Germans' ability to maintain control. Daniel's methods were not without risk, but the town learned to adapt. They utilized the landscape to their advantage, launching surprise attacks and melting away into the shadows. Confidence grew with every success, and the resistance began to attract attention from neighboring towns, inspiring others to join the fight. As the summer progressed, reports began circulating of larger Allied efforts in the region. The resistance in Daniel's town became part of a bigger picture, contributing to the momentum that would lead to the retreat of German forces from the area. Each skirmish weakened their hold, sapping their morale. The battles fought by Daniel and his comrades were more than just local fights. They were part of an unfolding plan against the enemy. By now, the town was no longer just a place under occupation. It was a beacon of hope. Daniel had seen how the spirit of the people could change the course of events. Together, They were not only fighting for their town, but standing firm for freedom across the land.